let me try to break your question down into two parts.
Okay.
First part is the first thing you said, which is about God doesn't care about me, about the I that I am. The I that I am does not exist. And that makes for a very difficult way for you to relate to God in the long run, to believe that. I would offer you a different way to see it. Rather than to say God doesn't care about me, say instead, God cares about me, but he doesn't recognize the me that I try to be. In other words, how you are relating to me, when you say I, you are accepting a concept of yourself, whatever that may be, is going to be in the heart of God. What God does not relate to is what you do with that sense of self. The image that you try to create as a result of that self's, that I belief. So we take away the belief. And that's all you have to do. It's all you have to think of, is when you shed the belief, then the I that is there and the God that is there is exactly the same. Okay? If you think about it in that way, Dennis, you won't have a difficulty relating to the presence of God, which is very important to all of us to be able to do. You can't relate to the presence of what we call the God Self or the Holy Spirit without relating to the presence of God, because there's only the one. Okay? Part 2 would be the praying. The traditional use of prayer asks for something because it believes that something is missing. So it's always praying to God to help me see this, or to bring this to me, or to do this, to do something. And you're right, that does nothing except make you feel separate again. So in your mind, when, even though you believe or may feel very strongly that there is something missing, your prayer to God is to ask for help, is to offer gratitude that you have all of the things that you think are missing. Offer gratitude that you have what you think is missing. That immediately begins to change your mindset. Now you're not coming from a place of have not, but you're opening your mind to an awareness of what you might have but have not yet accepted. And now you can ask the God Self to show you. Simply that. Show me. Show me what it is that I think I need that I already have. And show me if I'm not able to relate to it, then show me how to relate to it. So you see, you've twisted the whole thing then. Now you're coming from an attempt to understand the truth from what is truthful and not what is an illusion. I'm saying to change your mind from coming from the place that thinks something is missing to recognizing, even though it may be an intellectual exercise for you at the moment, but you open your mind by being grateful for what you have, even though you don't feel you have. Now your mind is in a different place, able to accept when you go to the God Self and say, now help me to see how I can become aware that I do have this. see that in the final analysis, when we bypass all the shimmerings of Jesus and Buddha and God and me, what we come down to is a singularity. It is the oneness, and we give it the name God, but it is the oneness within which everything that lives exists. And so what creates an experience is the same thing that asks for the experience. So it's both me saying, God help me, and it's me saying, here's your help. Because it's the same oneness. So to say, why do some have it and some don't? If you ask, you have it. And you ask when there is a purpose and a meaningfulness for what can come. That's, as we've said, the meaning that you give to everything is based upon how whole or lack of whole that you see yourself. So the idea, the concept of sacrifice is comes from the belief that there's something missing. So when you begin there, you can't end up in a place that has any truthful connotations at all. Don't always be misled to think that you can't ask for guidance on things that are strictly ego-oriented. Because you can. And get it. Get it very well. It's not going to serve you in the long run in as good a stead as asking how to see the truth of it, because this problem that I asked for help with will appear, obviously, will have to appear in another form, and another form, and another form, until I finally am able to get, to the truth of it. But that, again, that doesn't mean that when you walk into Joanne's that you can't say, show me where this fabric is that I need. Or before you get there to ask, does Joanne have the fabric I need? Or whatever. Because you can. Keep in mind again, the one asking and the one getting are the same one. And you are not asked to pretend to be holy. But you are asked to open your mind to the possibility that you could be holy.
And that could be read as whole.
Yes, and very definitely the same connotation.
So what's the deeper prayer then? So you said that.
Well, as you were saying that, I would think if that were me walking in, I would say, what is it about this place that symbolically represents something for me that seems to be fearful?
Okay.
The question and the answer are always together. You cannot ask a question for which there is no answer, for which you do not have the answer. But you have to be willing to receive it. And a lot of the times what happens, what gets in the way, is the reason that I have been neglecting to accept this answer is because there's some part of it that I am really afraid of. So I won't even ask, you see. I know that if I ask, the answer is going to be there. But if I ask and I don't get the answer, whoops. It's because something in me is too fearful to let it in. So, become brave, go to the presence of the God Self and say, show me that I can be safe enough to receive this answer and help me to have it. But you'll never ask a question. You really will never ask a question for which you're not ready to receive the answer. So trust it. And the answer is always there. When this experience first began with me, and I asked the Holy Spirit, or I suggested to the Holy Spirit, that I would be willing to help other people if He would help me to get information before I knew anything about any of these principles or anything else. I began to have an experience where I would have the same, what I'm just describing to you would happen over and over and over again throughout the day. Every time I would think of any question, the most insignificant, unrelated to spirit, it didn't matter, any question, the answer was there. Why is that important for any of us to know? Why is that really important for us to know? That we are both the one asking and the one answering. What is it that we're trying to learn?
Who we are.
We're trying to learn that there is only one.
Right.
Just one. One of the things we should have explained to you is that the Course speaks on two different levels. One is the level of truth and the other is from the level of our perception. So when you're trying to define being perfect from the ego's perspective can never be attained, because the ego's belief is based upon the fact that something is missing. So whenever you gain whatever you thought was missing, there will be something else that seems to be missing because it has to satisfy that belief. But coming from the other level, the level of what is true and real, you have always been perfect. There's never been anything missing from you. So when you're wondering about being defensive, are you being defensive because you're trying to defend the ego's position? Obviously, that's the only thing that we can be defensive about. And so how do I best get over being defensive? Defending my ego? I begin by recognizing that what the ego defends isn't true. That this whole idea of ego perfection is something that has no meaning. But there is another meaning in being perfect. And that is that I have never been able to change the way God created me. Is it possible to look at somebody, a character in the play of Putin, and say, show me the face of Christ? Show me the Buddha? Is that possible? Is it possible to take a step beyond the character? Yes, it is. You can do that. And eventually you will have to do that. Because that's how what you're going to request of yourself. Help me to see myself beyond this character that I seem to be playing. Once you've gone to the desperation part, it's what Tom was saying. Once you've gone to the desperation part, you've lost yourself already. Before that ever happens, as you're looking at the character, you're saying, you ask, what am I missing here? What's behind this character? Not what's behind what this character is doing. That's irrelevant. It's really irrelevant. What's behind the character?
And you're talking wholeness. You're talking God.
Yeah,
Love.
that's exactly what I'm talking about. You look at Putin and say, show me how to accept or to forgive the deeds that he's doing. No, you can't. The deeds are supposed to be unforgivable. What you're supposed to be able to do, though, is to look at them and say, show me the irrelevance. I think what you've uncovered there is the deeper meaning of what Jesus in the Course means when he very consistently and in many different ways says, see your brother as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come to see that there's only the one voice,
Mm-hmm.
and someone then seems to be speaking to you, how does that change? How does that change the whole dynamic of how you receive what seems to be coming to you? It's not an answer you need to come up with, but I think when something that profound suddenly dawns upon your mind, it's very helpful to try to anchor it by saying, well, how does this really influence or affect me? What do I do differently now that perhaps will make a difference? Will anchor that with me in my perception.
Mm-hmm.
The path to oneness is the only path that we're all taking. If it doesn't seem to go there, believe me, I know I'm missing the message. So when it becomes apparent that there is only the one voice for God, and that voice is my voice, and it's your voice, and it's whatever, then suddenly I begin to get a different feeling about who I am. There are different ways to be joyful. Sometimes our greatest joy comes when we're absolutely quiet. How do you feel about giving up your body? Have you ever thought about it? There is nothing the ego has in its perception that is not identified with the body. Okay? There is nothing in your perception that does not identify with the body. So how do we then rationalize, if you will, this thought of letting the body go? Where do we begin with that thought? Well, we begin by recognizing it's not the body. Please hear me. It is not the body we are reluctant to let go. Okay? What it is the thought the body represents. And that is the thought of needing to be separate. So when we focus our attention on, oh my God, how can I really let this body go? All we're doing is trying to rationalize it from within the ego's perception where there is no answer. There is no answer there. There is no conclusion that we can come to. But there is a conclusion we can come to when we try to think about it from the standpoint of what purpose does the body serve? What do I use the body for? To play golf? To play tennis? Or to be separate? To be separate. That's the one purpose that the body will serve. Now we have something that we can take to a different form of reasoning. The reasoning of the God Self or the Holy Spirit. Because the Holy Spirit can begin to tell you your fear of needing to be separate from God is groundless. There is nothing real there. But that's what we really fear. That's what the body seems to do for us. So listen to the God Self. Try to explain to you that the need to be separate is false. And approach it from that point of view. And now you're at a place where you can bring reason into the conversation. But as I said before, there is no way to do that as long as you are looking at, from within the ego's perception, you are looking at a rationalization of how you can be satisfied in letting the body go, because it's not there.
Seems like the only way we can entertain that thought is to think of it in terms of being in the holy mind.
Being in the holy mind would certainly eliminate our reluctance to be with God, wouldn't it?
Yeah. If you can just think of it in terms of letting the body go, the you has got to be the holy mind, or otherwise it just, doesn't work.
You let go of the need to be separate, and you can be a part of that holy mind. Because there is no guilt. Obviously, there is no guilt in the holy mind. So once you have let go of that need to be separate, you've let go of an idea of guilt. The God Self is telling you, it is not real. Your thoughts of having sinned against God are totally untrue. So, time would seem to be the biggest proof that separation is real, because it removes the past from the present. And so we just automatically presume that, that is the sequence. There is a sequence of things. Not recognizing that the only thing that is true, that is real, is that there is an infinite now. Just now, just now, just now. And how do we succumb to that just now? We stop making judgments based upon the past. The difference in illusions are that some of them promote the illusion, and some of them lead you away from illusion toward the truth. And that, of course, is what the Course is doing. It's teaching us, it is an illusion itself, but it's teaching us that we are not an illusion. This image of who we pretend to be is an illusion. And it's that part of us that feels a need to benefit from the book.
I still get confused with that I need do nothing.
Well, there are two parts to it. The first part is what we said before, which is that what could you do to change yourself, to make yourself better, or make yourself worse, when you are right now everything that is. So you need do nothing. The second understanding of that, the second application, let's say, is one that is more designed to thwart the ego's drive as a doing entity, Because what he tells us over and over again is that we are not in charge of this enlightenment or awakening process. What we are in charge of is asking the God Self to do it for us. And in fact, he tells us you can't do it. You can't depend upon your perception, which is based upon the absolute certainty that there's something wrong with you, to lead you to a path of understanding that there's nothing wrong with you. So that's the other part of it. You need do nothing. In fact, I think there's one part in there where he says, not only need you not do nothing, you can do nothing. The thing that illustrates the point you were making earlier is that as we begin, as all of us begin this journey, we would say to ourselves, what we really want more than anything is to discover or remember the love of God. I mean, isn't that what we're all trying to do, to get to that place where we say, oh, finally I remember? Well, guess what? The thing we fear the most right now is the love of God. It's not the ego. It's the love of God. The ego doesn't threaten us because we have created the ego. The love of God is what threatens us because we feel that this ego thing that we created, that we adopted as a sense of self, would be completely quashed in the presence of the love of God. And it would. We're right, it would be. But the point is, that's what would set us free. And we don't recognize that yet. So the dichotomy of thinking that we're searching for this, while inwardly it's what we're trying to avoid, is what makes all of this seem to be difficult. Because we're pursuing something at the same time we're running away from it. And so it takes us a long time to finally get to the place where we are no longer threatened by losing the identity that we have made. And when we get to that point, it's downhill. Because then we stop resisting. This morning I had such a beautiful experience in my meditation. One of those times that I haven't had for a long, long time. Because I've been going through my own resistances. But I started this morning by listening to the voice say to me, you no longer need be concerned with time. Because time has been the great deceiver of your thinking there is something for you to overcome. And so I just sat with that and I began to get the feeling of what it would be like just to be in this moment when there was no judgment. There was no possibility of sin. There was no possibility that I've done anything wrong right now, right now, right now. And just hold that present moment. Then I heard the voice say, feel the presence of the Christ within you. Now, it needed nothing more than that. No other description of what that meant. Because I knew, we all know. We all know exactly what that means. But you see, this morning I was in a place where I didn't resist it. And so it came through. And it was just such a beautifully light, loving, joyful experience. And I was in it for quite some time until I heard my own voice say, Gee, I wonder how long I can hold on to this. Then guess what? Anyway, I just suggest to you that what he tells us, what he teaches us in this course, stop taking it for granted that you know what it means. Just let it be the tool that opens your mind to the possibility that there's something there that you might be willing to accept. Because everything that it teaches us, there isn't anything that's in this course that we don't already know. So sit back and just ask yourself each time if you are open to accepting it. And if not, why not? If you still feel as though you need the identification of the ego, okay, no problem. It's not doing anything, it's not harming you. Let it be. Let it be. Because there will come a moment when you are not threatened. And that moment will arrive infinitely sooner when you stop resisting the other moments that it won't arrive. You see what I'm saying? That's how powerfully subtle our ego is. But the love of God is stronger. It is the nature of who we are. And so it must come through. Long time ago, I said, what can I do that will help me the most? And guess what his answer was? Nothing. Took me the longest time to recognize what he really meant by that. Nothing. What can I do? Nothing. Stop doing. Just stop doing. Stop feeling the need to do anything. It's back again to that I need do nothing thing. Just surrender. Try this. Have a meditation sometime. And tell yourself that you are going to say yes to loving. I am going to say yes to loving myself. And then sit with that and watch the resistance that comes up. And ask yourself each time it comes up, what's here for me? These are just old ideas, so what's here for me? What should I get from this? And then one day you will be able to say yes, and there will be no resistance. Can you feel the presence of God that's here right now?
Yeah, big time.
Of course. Yes. That's what we surrender to, just that.
You know, it's my plan to understand all this stuff. It's my plan to create the perfect environment. It's my plan to live in nature. It's my plan, and then never.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Let your plan be okay. But let your plan lead you to God's plan. Don't resist it. Don't make it wrong. That's just one more thing to judge yourself for. Don't go there. But just recognize that the God self will take whatever you give them and use it to the very best advantage for you. So when you're thinking about this is what I'm trying to do, just say that's okay. Because I know that will be used to help me. The biggest thing any of us can do is to learn that we don't need to judge ourselves for anything. Anything. That's the now moment. Can you see that? We all think we're separate, right? But I sit here and I look at Barbara. Is this Barbara I'm looking at? No. It's just Tom. It's true.
Okay.
It's true, because inside, what is it that's looking? These eyes, what do these eyes see? Nothing. The eyes don't see anything. It's the mind. And right now, the only thing the mind is encompassing is this image of itself. So everything it sees is just a projection of that image. And that's why he keeps telling us, wait a minute, you don't need to do that. The Holy Spirit, the God Self, has another image. And that image is also in your mind. So relax. Relax. Let that feeling come into your awareness. Let yourself, the way he tells us that we can perceive, learn to perceive a real world, is to first perceive a real sense of ourself. And then we see everything through that awareness. The awareness of the true self sees everything in truth. Because there isn't anything physical to see. Again, it's just awareness exposing itself. You see? So once I let into my awareness this truth of being a part of everything and everything being a part of me, then the way I see, quote unquote see, becomes an extension of that awareness.
So you still would see Barbara as yourself, but a different self.
It's really hard to try to put any kind of a definition on it, quite honestly. Because all of it changes. And I've only had this for almost, just short smatterings of time. So I can't really say. I don't know. But we don't look outward and see anything. Because there's nothing out there. All of those images are just what I've put there. Validations that there's something that can be separate from me.
There's a loving, caring God that cares about, but it doesn't, if what I have experienced is,
So when that person says, there is a loving, caring God for me out there, what do you say to them? Yes.
well,
Yes. Say yes. No, just say yes. Just say yes.
what does that mean?
It means,
It's up to them to figure that one out.
no, it means that you are trusting implicitly that that person is being led perfectly to find what he needs to find
Oh, I see, yeah.
and what he's willing to accept in any moment.
Yeah, so don't go and explain it anymore.
No.
Sure.
I never, for the longest time, when people would ask Brother questions and I would give his answer, he always, in one way or another, would say yes.
I say, well, look, it never happened. This is a dream. You can't say that to somebody who's,
Sometimes.
lost a
Sometimes you can, but you have to ask, that's all.
Yeah.
You ask. question to always ask is, what do I say to this person that will make them feel loved right now? Regardless of what the questions seem to be. Because every one of us asks the same question over and over and over again. What do I need to do to be loved? Even when they say things like, you're really a bad person. You know, what they're really saying is, I don't feel loved right now. So what can you do to help me feel more loved? If we could hear that as their question, would we defend ourselves? Or would we simply reach out to them and love them? Brother tells us we only have access to two emotions, love and fear. Those are the only two, categorically, that we access. And you will choose which one you're going to experience by which one you hear. So when you are hearing a call for love, there isn't any fear. So you don't respond in fear. And fear is then not part of your experience.
Whenever we see a dilemma in someone else, it's a call for love. But interestingly, the humorous part about it is that it's you having to say the dilemma. And that's kind of funny.
It would really be coincidental, Sam, if we weren't all connected.
Mm-hmm.
But because we are all connected, it's perfectly normal for it to turn out that way.
But I'll say this because I'm working on love.
Yes. But honey, nothing will ever come to you. No question will ever be asked you that it doesn't benefit you to give the answer. Go inside and honestly say to this God self, show me how to teach them that they are loved. You are saying, show me how to teach myself. You teach me that I am loved. And when could that not be a perfect answer for you as well as them? That's, to me, that's the meaning of integrity. That I don't need to placate my ego. I don't need to have a spiritual ego. I can say, by showing me how to help them.
The way you move into the
Yes.
heart.
Yeah.
Yes. Most of our problems arise because we think there's something missing. And so we go about figuring out how to overcome that, how to get what we don't have. Rather than recognizing it's the belief that there is something missing that we need to work with. If I am willing to see that I am whole, there could be nothing missing.
Yeah.
Have you noticed how you pride yourself on being a problem solver? I mean, this is something that we've a long time taught ourselves is really good, right? I used to pride myself on being the best problem solver in my company until I recognized how many problems there were to solve. To kind of follow the advice that's given in this appointed friend section, which is to learn to start relying more on asking what something means rather than trying to use your ego to figure it out. In other words, when you say you pay too much attention to the words, if you weren't aware, if you weren't a student, as Tom obviously is, of the total content of the course, then you could be confused by the words. So rather than get yourself all tangled up that way, when it's, in fact, I would make an even more sweeping statement than that. I would say that the single most important thing that you could learn from the beginning chapters of this course is to establish a nurturing relationship with the Holy Spirit. To give yourself a source that you could depend on, that you didn't have to rely on the ego's interpretation for anything.
I think depending on the Holy Spirit is one of the hardest shifts that we make.
Why do you suppose that is?
We're so used to it.
Why, before we even got used to it, Brian, why would that be so easy for us to do? In fact, it's not just easy, it's what we try to do. Don't for a moment lose sight of the fact that the idea of separation, which is what we're trying to correct in our awareness here, that the idea of separation is the need to be separate from God. And the Holy Spirit, being God's tool, so to speak, serves the same function. So staying away from, not allowing yourself to get too close, to rely too heavily on the Holy Spirit, serves the purpose of the ego's original intention to find a distinct need to be separate from God. That's what we commonly refer to as the fear of God. How many of you have really been able to be in touch with this sense that there are moments when you can feel this great bubbling up of love for God, and yet at other times you just, for instance, the statement that Tom quoted a moment ago, where Brother says, as you begin to let go of the idea of sin, you'll find yourself more willing to disappear into God. How many of us would be willing to disappear into God right now, right this moment? Well, why? Why? Everything that we're learning teaches us the beauty, the sense of complete safety and being loved, and the desire to fulfill our desire to be wholly loving. All goes away as we meld into the presence of God. So why don't we? What is that little glitch? It's no big secret, actually. It's the belief that we separated from God with good reason. Look at the story that's told about the Garden of Eden. About how everything was happy and fine. Then God said, it's all okay, but don't do that. And we did that. And my goodness, God said, okay, out of here.
Yeah.
Trying to get back to that core reason, that underlying belief that we have become so familiar with, so familiar dodging, that we don't even recognize we're doing it. So it helps me to stay focused on what it is that I am trying to learn. That it's still letting my awareness be able to freely embrace the idea that sin is not real. It simply is not real. Rather than leaning on all of my little ego side roads and attempts to distract me by pursuing its own spirituality. Well, the way we do that is to watch all of the opportunities that our ego brings up for us to judge someone. Watch the news if you don't get out enough. Watch the news. Look at the fear, look at the hatreds and so forth that you see everywhere. And you say to that person, there's no need for this. You are not guilty. This idea that you've done something to earn God's judgment, to become separate from me, from Him, is not true. You just begin to see things differently.
It's one of my favorite quotes from the Course, is I'm determined to see things differently.
And until we are, we'll continue to practice those things that reaffirm that guilt is real. Knowing you have a choice is vital. But knowing the reason you have that choice is because sin is not real is equally vital. Otherwise, your ego is going to find every justification in the world saying, oh, well, you can say anything. So you have to take it in, absorb it into your belief that this thing that we have judged ourselves for does only exist in our mind, in our imagination. And the only way that we do that, the forgiveness process, the only way that we make the forgiveness process work is by using it, as you said, every day. You know something? There isn't anybody that really believes that.
On the deepest level, yeah, I'm sure that's true.
Even, yes, and I mean on the deepest level, even of the ego. There isn't anybody who doesn't know that what we're trying to do is escape from our fear of God. Another way to describe this thing we're talking about and calling depression, Brother says depression is the feeling that you'll never have what you want. And what you truly want is to know that you are loved. So doesn't take much to translate that, does it? So where do we go? How can we then let ourselves into this feeling? Well, we have to go to that place where there is no deception about love, or whether or not we are loved, or can love. And that again is back to having nurtured this presence that we call the Holy Spirit. That's why God gave it to us, so that we would have some way to distinguish between what our ego says and what is true. I think the love that we talk about and experience in this world is a very good intention. But before we learn to rely upon it as the real thing, we need to take it to the Holy Spirit and ask to see the same thing through those loving eyes. Because it's not the same thing. It is not the same thing. The love that we're talking about here is lacking. And the way you can always tell that is because it appears that there is a way to lose it. And love is not an option, actually. Love is something that defines who we are.
When I feel love, I feel joy, and I don't know how to say this, but when I have those feelings, that feels so great. Shouldn't that be, that's not good enough, or I don't quite understand.
Yes, do that. The next time that happens, do exactly that. Say, this is not good enough.
Really?
Show me. Show me what else is here.
Because at that time, I don't feel like I need to ask for anything.
I know, honey. That's why we're talking about it. There is more. The ego does not know how to love. Ego has its own version of what love is, and there is more. So do, please, ask, what else is here for me? I know what you mean when you say there is a fear of being able to be overwhelmed by love. But I'll tell you what I discovered about that. The reason is because I was afraid of the love. I was afraid that I would lose it, that if it was too much, it would be more than I could handle, and I would lose it. If you, again, my own personal experience, one time I said, oh, to hell with it. Bring it on. And it's not going to be too much.
No.
But it will open you to a distinctly greater possibility.
So it's not love, I love this person or I love that person, it's I just love. Period.
That's why I say, Kathy, that's a good intention. But when that feeling arises, take it a little further. When you feel like that you love someone, for instance, say to yourself, is there someone or is there some other application of this that I would be benefited by? This feeling being, what I'm meaning is this feeling of loving. Just don't allow any feeling of loving to be confined. My point is that love is something so much greater than what we use it for. And to learn of it, to really recognize what it is, we have to open, it's in us. We do know on some level, but to open ourselves to the awareness of it, we have to be willing to allow that awareness in to our current consciousness, so to speak. So important to recognize that love is not something that you create or conjure up or bring in from some other source. Love is who you are. The expression of love is what you are.
Can that apply to, I love to garden. I'm in my garden many hours every day. And I get a lot of joy out of that. Can that be the same kind of love you're talking about? I mean,
Yeah, for instance, honey, maybe if you were to ask yourself, while this joy was, you were in this state of joy, working in your garden, is there anywhere that it's not possible for me to experience this same joy? Could I experience this joy in the supermarket? Could I experience this joy, wherever you are?
so try to bring it with me when I go other places. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I'm saying, recognize that joy, like the love, is who you are. It's a very natural expression of who you are. And when you're in your garden, you don't have a bunch of other stuff in the way. So that natural feeling can bloom. So you learn how not to let other things be in your way when you're in the supermarket or in a traffic line or wherever. Begin to be aware that there is so much about you that you don't know. That may sound trite, after all we've studied. But I'll tell you what. If tomorrow you could allow 1% of God's love into your life, you would never again question whether or not there was something that you were holding back, something else for you to experience. Yes, when you say, when I am in my garden, I feel joyful, you're attaching the sense of joy to the garden instead of to you. Because what's going on here? We're evaluating our own thoughts and then experiencing the effects of that evaluation. That's the only thing that's happening. So as you back away, as you seem to give it a little more space and not judge it, leap in and judge it right away, why your evaluation is more peaceful. And so you experience the whole circumstance more peacefully. That's what brings peace to the world. Interestingly enough now, what you did in fact influence the state of peace throughout the world. It's good for us to remember that nothing ever happens in isolation. It can't, because mind is joined. So whatever is happening in one corner of mind has got to be influencing everywhere. What do you think, Sam?
I was thinking about the appearance of terror around the world, and the idea that I'm not really separate from all that stuff out there.
Right? But you see, you don't have to call it terror.
Well, I don't have to see it that way either.
No, you don't. But the way you begin not to see it that way is to redefine what it is that you are seeing.
That's the hard part.
Well, as a matter of fact, that happens to be the easiest part. Once we learn how to do it,
Then what's hard?
the hard
That's
part,
really hard.
the hard part then is not dropping the baby. The hard part is following through with your thoughts. See, if we all, when we watch the news tonight, if instead of calling what's happening in Syria or even in Africa with the Ebola, if we didn't call that terror, if we instead said, there is a gigantic call for love, what immediately begins to happen to your emotions? Do you stay clenched up? Terror is something you're going to resist. A call for love is something you're going to respond to. So you see, you have immediately put it into a different category by simply redefining it in your mind from what it might seem to be to the ego to what you would be willing now to call it. And that's why it could have an influence, a positive influence. We many times refer to things as having an energy. And that's a good euphemism. But it isn't energy, it's awareness. And as your awareness becomes more peaceful, that is felt. It's transmitted and it's felt. Well, that's how we begin to get it, Sam,
Mm-hmm.
is to open ourselves to the possibility of letting the experience in. And when you say to yourself, when you're watching something or something comes into your awareness that seems to be very fearful, and you say to yourself, help me to see the call for love that is here, and help me know how to respond to it. Boy, you've done exactly that. Are you the thought of God? Are you the creation of God? Is there something that is not the creation of God? In other words, we have a prime source that from day one, so to speak, is the creator, we call that the mind, the creator mind. We call how that mind expresses itself a thought. And so as that creator extended itself with a thought, then that's how we become created. That's how creation works. Well, if that's all happening in this, what we call the mind of God, then how do you get yourself out of that mind? How do you create another mind? How do you create something called an ego mind and juxtaposition yourself between the mind of God and the ego mind? It doesn't exist. You know, we are stuck with being where we were created. And that happens to be what we call, what I'm describing as, the mind of God. Now, how does the ego mind then come up? Well, this presence that we are, this creation that we are, is an absolutely unlimited creation. There is nothing this mind cannot conceive. Nothing. And so, as we went into that place that brother describes as a tiny mad idea came into the consciousness of God's Son, and we thought there was something wrong with us, we imagined that we had been booted out of that one mind. This is the story of the Garden of Eden. Here we are all nicely ensconced in our happy little consciousness, and suddenly we do something that seems to get us booted out. And so we created the sense of separateness. And with that sense of separateness, there seemed to be born another mind. And we call it the ego mind. But it didn't happen. It can't happen. It's absolutely impossible for it to have happened. Because the mind that we are didn't change. The awareness changed. And that's all we're trying now to correct, is the awareness.
Could you say the focus changed?
Okay, say focus, say awareness. Okay? So the separation itself never occurred.
But the belief in it did.
The belief did.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is to correct the belief.
Yeah.
Still, there's some kind of a gap there for me because.
Benny, the only reason there seems to be a gap is because you are trying to use a rationality that is associated with the presumption that something did happen. And so, of course, you can't make that. There isn't anything there to connect.
But I know that ultimately you know, if in the world of, in a conscious world, if I was connected to the one mind, which I am, but if I was aware that I was connected to the one mind now, you know, in the present, then I would know that nothing happened. Okay, but I'm not connected to the one mind right now.
Now, you see...
I mean, I am, but my awareness is not.
Now, wait a minute. You're doing it to yourself.
Yeah.
You're doing it to yourself in the same way that Sam was. When he said, there is a terrorist, I said, you're doing it to yourself. In the same way that Sam was, when he said, there is a terrorist doing this and this and this, you just automatically presumed from that misperceived awareness that something was true that's not true. Now, if you were to say to yourself, instead of saying to yourself, if only I was aware of my being connected to that mind, if instead you said, perhaps not right at this moment, but at some time, show me how I am connected. Make an appeal to this inner awareness of yourself and say, well, boy, instead of saying, well, boy, if I were connected, I'd probably be able to... No. Let's begin with the truth. And the truth is you are connected. And so you simply ask the benefit of seeing what that truth is.
Okay, so all these reasons have nothing to do with any kind of... So this forgiveness has nothing to do with what most people would say forgiveness is, which is, you know, seeing things from a broader perspective. And,
forgiveness evolves, Denny.
Yeah.
Forgiveness evolves from the place where you look at something that happened and you say, you know, I really could do better than that. And you elevate yourself to the next stage of awareness where you can say, well, maybe there's another way to see this. And finally, you can begin to come from that place that says, wait a minute, if I am seeing something differently, and I notice that it changed only because I saw it differently, what does that tell me?
Well, see, I know that there's no order to this. There's no order of forgiveness, for example, right? But in my mind, there kind of is, in a way. You know,
but now you're doing it again. Forgive me for interrupting. But you're doing it again.
Yeah.
This is the retraining of the mind that the Course tries to teach us. Find a place anywhere in this book where he says, if only you could do that, you would begin to see things my way. Never, ever presumes that. He says, this is the way it is. Ask the Holy Spirit to help you see it. It's that direct.
I think that your talk this morning really directed it to this issue really beautifully clear.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's very helpful. What he's referring to is that I find that it helps me a lot to remind myself that I am not this person, this character that I have created in the story that I'm telling. That's not me. I am the one dreaming about the character.
And also you talked about asking the Holy Spirit to come down and change our story, you know, to make it better. It's asking the Holy Spirit to lend credence to the existence of an illusion.
To forgive for us.
Which includes the ego itself.
Yes. Yes.
It's trying to bring the light to the darkness.
Yeah, you're right, Roger. That's exactly what it does.
But that request to ask the Holy Spirit to help us see this differently is one way of seeing more clearly of what's
I think it must be the difference between asking the Holy Spirit to come down and do this for us as opposed to giving it up to the Holy Spirit.
Well, the way that it makes the most sense for me is what you were just saying. When I can appeal to my inner God self to do this on my behalf, now I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm bringing light to darkness or whether I'm bringing the darkness to the light.
Right.
Reason will bring you to the truth, Sam. The problem is there is no reason in the ego's perception. And that's what we're talking about here. It's when you appeal to the reason in the God self-awareness that reason can lead you to the truth. But not when you appeal to the reason, or what we call reason, of the ego's perception, because there isn't any there.
Yeah.
The reason that the book always seems to be so logical is because it always begins from a point of reference that is the truth and moves from there. Where we go when we're left on our own without the guidance, the inner guidance of the God self, is we try to go to our perception of what is true and then find reason to make that all fit and become logical. And it's just not there. It can't happen. So that's why he teaches us, page by page, paragraph by paragraph. That's why he teaches us to ask. Just ask. Well, the ego doesn't reside in the mind, in fact, Roger. The ego creates the image of separateness, which the body we're calling it a body. But that is the ego's reference, its proof, so to speak, that its separateness is real. But there isn't actually a body for the ego to reside in.
Nor an ego to reside in the body.
Nor an ego to reside in the body.
They're both illusions. Which makes it kind of difficult to pinpoint where they live.
A perfect example of what we were talking about, isn't it? Because once we pick up and begin to find reason from that perspective, my goodness, it just doesn't seem possible.
No wonder I'm confused.
I'm reminded of when I went through a divorce and my attorney said, Brian, you're trying to reason with a person who is unreasonable. And it kind of sounds like what we're talking about here.
And he was talking about your ego, right?